I have a message for us tonight that it's been honestly weighing on me kind of heavy. I feel like God has a word for us tonight, a challenge for us tonight. And so I wanted to go to a passage in 2 Kings, but it's like a whole chapter long. It's super long, so I can't really read the whole thing, but I want to read like a good chunk of the story. And so if you want to get turning there, it's 2 Kings chapter 3, and there's a whole bunch happening. There's a whole bunch happening, and I kind of feel like I should give a little backstory, because some people know their Bibles really well, and others are like, King who? I know David and like Solomon and stuff. So what we're jumping into here in 2 Kings is quite a while after King David, okay? So most of you know King David was king over Israel, and then his son Solomon. And after he and Solomon reigned, the kingdoms actually split into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. The southern kingdom of Judah had kings in the line of David. And the northern kingdom of Israel had whoever fought and killed somebody else to be king. The northern kingdom of Israel never had a king that served God. And the southern kingdom of Israel, they're the line of David. They maintained the line of David, and there were some of his descendants that tried to bring back the heart of David, tried to follow God with all their heart, and there were some of his offspring that were quite terrible people. At this point in time, in 2 Kings 3, we're gonna get introduced to a few kings. So the first one, his name is Joram. And he is the son of Ahab. Everybody heard of Ahab, King Ahab and Jezebel? You know, they were like the really bad ones. So he's their son. And the Bible describes him, and the Bible's like, he wasn't as bad as his parents, but he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Like that's the byline you get about King Joram, you know? And anyway, while King Ahab was king, it's interesting because even though he was so wicked, Israel kind of continued to prosper, and Moab had to pay them tribute. They had to give them like 100,000 sheep and a bunch of wool and all this stuff, and they had to pay regular tribute. The kingdom of Moab had to pay regular tribute to Israel. Well, as soon as Ahab died, Moab got the bright idea, well, I don't want to pay their kid too, so they decided to rebel. And since he is a new king, he's like, well, I'm not just going to go attack him by myself. I'm going to go talk to Jehoshaphat, who's the king of, unfortunate name, isn't it? I'm going to go talk to King Jehoshaphat. He's the king of the southern kingdom of Judah. So he's in the line of David, and he's actually a very righteous king. Okay, so he goes and talks to Jehoshaphat, and he's like, hey, would you go with me to attack Moab? Okay, so you're starting to put some of these puzzle pieces together. Does anybody know where the descendants of Moab came from? Some people, you can shake your head. Moab was the son of Lot, Abraham's nephew, right? And then, so you got the kingdom of Israel, the kingdom of Judah, and now we're going to add a third player. It says that they wanted to go through the kingdom of, the kingdom of Edom, to get to where they needed to go to attack Moab. So now they've got this coalition of three kings, the king of Israel, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom. Edom were the descendants of Esau. You see how these all connect back in Genesis? And so when you're reading through the kings, you can start to put some of these pieces together. And obviously, many of them are struggling with serving Yahweh God. They don't know Yahweh God. And so there's all this backstory, and now I'm going to go ahead and jump in with verse 9. Chapter 3 in verse 9. So the king of Israel set out with the king of Judah and the king of Edom. And after a roundabout march of 7 days, the army had no more water for themselves or for their animals with them. What? Exclaimed the king of Israel. Has the Lord called us three kings together only to hand us over to Moab? But Jehoshaphat asked, is there no prophet of the Lord here that we may inquire of the Lord through him? An officer of the king of Israel answered, Elisha, son of Shaphat, is here. He used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. Basically, he was a servant of Elijah. Jehoshaphat said, the word of the Lord is with him. So he'd heard of Elisha's reputation. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to Elisha. And I love this. This kind of speaks to Elisha's stature, right? Like, you got 3 kings, and they don't send someone to you to go get you. They come to you. Shows his importance. So they all go down to Elisha, and Elisha says to the king of Israel, what do we have to do with each other? Why don't you go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother? Ooh. Remember who his parents are? King Ahab. King Ahab and Jezebel served the Baals, right? And so Elisha does not have any respect at all for the king of Israel and the gods that he served. He's like, why are you talking to me? You don't even serve my gods. Go check with your parents' gods, don't you? That's a nice little burn. I love it because, like, there's sarcasm in the Bible, and sometimes we need to see that. We get so religious about things, you know, and you read that and you're like, man, Elisha's kind of salty. No, the king of Israel answered, because it was the Lord who called us 3 kings together to hand us over to Moab. And so he's got to hand us over to Moab. I thought you were going to go and conquer Moab. Elisha said, as surely as the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, if I did not have respect for the presence of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, I would not even look at you or notice you. Man, he's escalating it even more. Like, he really does not like Joram. And then he goes, all right, bring me a harpist. So they bring him a harpist. And I love it because, like, you know, if you ever need a word from the Lord, I'm going to probably, like, if you ever need a word from the Lord, you come to me, I'm going to be like, hey, John, can you get the guitar? Can you hum a few bars for me? I'm going to see if I can get a word from the Lord. Like, there's biblical precedent, right? So while the harpist was playing, the hand of the Lord came upon Elisha. And he said, this is what the Lord says. Make this valley full of ditches. You will see neither wind nor rain, yet this valley will be filled with water, and you, your cattle, and your animals will drink. This is an easy thing in the eyes of the Lord. And I love this. And to me, it kind of ends up being a picture of revival, right? Like, God's going to pour out the water, and it's not going to come the way that you expect it. You just got to get ready. You've got to start digging. You got to start making the wells of revival. You got to start digging ditches. You got to start plowing the ground. You got to start preparing for the water to come. Even though you're in a desert, there's no water. It's like Noah building an ark. Like, why are you building an ark? There's no sign of rain, right? There's no sign of rain. It feels dry, but you must start digging ditches. You must start asking God, crying out, God, I want revival. Come pour out your water. Come pour out your blessing. Come bring your provision. Come provide for our animals. Come provide for our church. And you can see the picture of this. But I love it because it doesn't just stop there. It's not just this picture of revival and water pouring out and us learning that we have to dig and we have to do something. We do something in expectation of partnership with God, don't we? And then it says, this is an easy thing in the eyes of the Lord. He will also hand Moab over to you. Like, wait, what? Just go dig a few ditches and then Moab's going to be ours? Doesn't make any sense at all. It's like, this is starting to sound like the Walls of Jericho story or one of the other things that, like, why is the king of Israel getting God to why is God doing this for the king of Israel? And it is only because of Jehoshaphat and his righteousness, right? So, verse 20, the next morning, about the time of the offering the sacrifice, there it was, water flowing in the direction of Edom. And the land was filled with water. So it kind of skips part of the story because it doesn't tell us that they went out and sweated and got shovels and dug ditches. It doesn't say how they did it. It just says that the land was filled with water. So they took Elisha at his word and they started preparing. They started preparing. When the word of God comes forth, what do you got to do? You got to start preparing. You got to start getting ready. And you don't always get to tell the story of all the preparation that went into it. All the hard work, all the prayers, all the crying out to God, all the asking for revival, for God to move again, to do it again, to prepare your heart. You don't always get to tell all the story of the preparation. It's just, the water's here, it's great. Come join us, come get refreshed. So the land was filled with water. Verse 21, now all the Moabites had heard that the kings had come to fight against them. So every man, young and old, who could bear arms was called up and stationed on the border. When they got up early in the morning, the sun was shining on the water. And to the Moabites across the way, the water looked red like blood. That's blood, they said. Those kings must have fought and slaughtered each other. Now to the plunder, Moab. So they go rushing in, thinking they're going to just get to steal a bunch of plunder from somebody who, like, they fought each other and killed each other off. Like, let's just go in and steal all the loot. They're not running in ready for battle. So, excuse me. So, in this moment, the very thing that was the provision of the Lord, from one side was obvious that this is water. But from the enemy's side, it looked like time for plunder. The moment that looks like your defeat in the eyes of the enemy is the moment that God wants to bring you victory. And it depends on how you're looking at it and whether or not you have a word from the Lord. Because if you have a word from the Lord, you know how to interpret the sign. You've prepared, you've dug the ditches, you've dug out the trenches, you know what's coming and you're ready for it. But to the enemy is ready to pounce. The enemy thinks I'm going to kick them while they're down. That's what it looks like. You know, we were telling our testimony about Madeline, and you get a bad diagnosis, and what does it look like at first? It looks like defeat. It looks like defeat at first, but we looked that defeat in the face and we said, no, this is going to be the place of our greatest victory. This battleground is going to be the place that shows the hand of the Lord providing, the hand of the Lord stepping in and giving us a miracle. This is going to be the place. And so what looks like red blood to the enemy, the time to pounce, and you might feel that pounce. You might feel the enemy coming at you. You need to hold on to the word of the Lord. You need to hold on to the word that he's given you. And what did he give you? It's time to dig ditches. It's time to prepare. It's time to get ready for revival. It's time. It's time to get ready. But when the Moabites came up to the camp of Israel, what happened? The Israelites rose up and fought them until they fled. And the Israelites invaded the land and defeated the Moabites. They destroyed the towns, and each man threw a stone on every good field until it was covered. And they stopped up all the springs and cut down every good tree. So they're running in, and not only were the Moabites initially thinking, we're going to get an easy victory. No, the Israelites chased them back out into their own land and conquered. What a powerful time. Holding on to the word of the Lord, moving forward at his word and saying, I'm going to follow, I'm going to obey. This is going to be my victory. And preparing for the wells of revival, preparing for that stirring. God is calling us. And many of you have been through that before. Many of you have seen the revival poured out. Many of you know exactly what it's like to dig ditches and to prepare. You've been through that season of preparation before. You've been through the season of getting ready. And God says, I'm going to do something new. I'm going to do something new. And you know what it's like to get ready. Have you grown weary? Have you gotten tired? Have you decided, well, the ditches I dug last year or 5 years ago or 10 years, they're deep enough. They're deeper than most other people's. Why do I have to keep digging? Somebody new should have to dig for a while. And we can get an attitude and we can decide, oh, I don't need to. We can grow weary and just decide it's taking too much work. It takes a lot of work to dig ditches. It takes a lot of work to prepare. It takes a lot of work to get ready. But that can be the moment of victory. That can be the moment of victory that God is preparing us for. So we need to start getting ready. But that's not all that this passage has to offer us tonight. There's a lot more here, and there's a verse that I'm guessing most of you have read over. I read over it dozens of times and missed it. Only Kir-Hareseth was left with its stones in place, but men armed with slings surrounded it and attacked it as well. So Israel's still closing in on Moab, but this one last stronghold remained. And when the king of Moab saw that the battle had gone against him, he took with him 700 swordsmen to break through to the king of Edom, but they failed. So this one last-ditch effort, the enemy isn't going down without a fight. And many of us kind of know what this feels like too. It feels like there's going to be this one last push from the enemy. It feels like there's this one last push where he's trying to break down our defenses. He's trying to break through our walls. He's trying to stop the onslaught of our victory and to distract us. And we can't let it happen. And Israel held up against that too. But then he got really desperate. In verse 27, it says this: Then he took his firstborn son, who was to succeed him as king, and offered him as a sacrifice on the city wall. And the fury against Israel was great, and they withdrew and returned to their own land. Are you catching this with me? The fury against who? Israel? Wait, they're the ones with the promises. They're the ones with the word from Elijah. They're the ones that had been digging the ditches. They're the ones that had been walking in victory. What happened? What changed? Well, technically nothing. The king of Moab just murdered one more person. But this moment was symbolic in their pagan culture, wasn't it? They thought it had power. They thought that it had power. When the king of Moab sacrificed his own son on the city wall right in front of all of Israel and all of his own people, they thought that's a powerful moment. That's going to change everything. And what happened? The tides turned. And what was going to look like a sure victory, they withdrew and backed off. And we go, well, I'm not going to be distracted by child sacrifice. Like, I don't believe in that. No, what does the devil have to do to get you? Just get you offended? Something's bothering you? Something's not working out like you thought? It's just not like it used to be. The fury was against Israel, and it became a great fury, and they withdrew. They backed off. They backed off the promises. They had complete victory. What happened? And I want to ask us tonight at World Revival Church, we are on the brink, if you will, of complete victory. What happened? You personally were on the brink of complete victory. What happened? What voice came in and convinced you that there's something else? What event took place that was so devastating that convinced you the enemy has the power? What was it? What was it that was so convincing? Was it as convincing as a child sacrifice? Or did it take less? We do these same things, don't we? We let the enemy talk us out of our victory with one last-ditch effort that is convincing to us. What did you get talked out of with? What's caused you to back down? Because we do the same thing. All the enemy has to do is spread out a little offense. No one has to actually die, right? A little bit of bitterness worked in. It's just not meeting my expectations. Worship just isn't like it used to be. Is it because worship actually changed or because you changed? Is it because Pastor Steve started suddenly preaching something different or because you're receiving it different than you used to? Because from my perspective, he's still preaching the same commitment message and devotion to Jesus message that I've always heard him preach. But what's causing you to back off? What's causing you to back down? What's causing you to get distracted? What voice? I don't feel it anymore. When was this about your feelings? When was this about your feelings? You got to feel it to believe it? You got to feel it to make it happen? We're not on Daystar anymore. People I loved hurt me. People I loved walked out of my life. Is that all it takes to distract you from the victory, from the word of the Lord? Is that what it takes? Just somebody has to hurt you, you get a deep wound, and now you don't have to walk out the victory that God gave you? Some of you have been digging ditches for years, and you're about to walk away from the thing that you have been plowing for years and years and years. You're about to walk away. Why? What changed? God's word didn't change. And I'm not talking about walking out of our church. I'm talking about the fact on fire for God. You used to be the first one to the altar, and now you're thinking about what you're going to get in the coffee shop while somebody's preaching. You used to be the one pressing in, pursuing after infant and toddler ministry. You were coming up here and just spending another half hour or more on the prayer floor, seeking God. You get home after a message, and you were on your face, and now you're in front of Netflix. You're distracted. You're distracted, and God's wanting to do something, and we've stopped preparing. We've stopped digging the ditches, because the ditches aren't just dug here on the prayer floor, are they? They're dug at home. They're dug where you're pursuing God. Remember that raw hunger and passion that you felt, that desire to have God and nothing else? You felt like you were going to die if you didn't get him. If you didn't feel his presence, if you didn't walk in his glory, if you didn't see another miracle, you didn't know what you'd do. And now you've become distracted. Distracted by what? What is it that got you? What is it that has convinced you? Because it's probably a little bit different for each one of us, isn't it? This might be something that's happened slowly over the last couple months or the last couple years. Maybe you just started getting distracted this week. I don't know what it is for you, but every single one of us should desire, no, I'm staying hungry. I'm staying passionate. I'm not going to let anything come between me and total and complete victory. Moab doesn't get to determine my destiny. The pagan gods don't get to determine my destiny. The voices of the enemy don't get to determine my destiny. What's stopping you from running to the altar? What's the voice in your head? What's the busyness that's caught you? You're just not pressing in like you were. And you guys all know better than to think I'm talking about whether or not you're raising your hands in church. Anybody can do that. I'm talking about the fire. I'm talking about the passion. I'm talking about the hunger. And you know when it's there and you know when it's not. That's what I'm talking about. And now we can talk about like the accoutrements that come with it. We can talk about lifting our hands. We can talk about coming to the altar. We can talk about those things because that's what a fiery person does. But it's not the only thing a fiery person does. A fiery person goes home and digs it out. They dig those ditches. They prepare a place in their heart for God's glory, for that water to come rushing in and to refresh someone else and to tip off the enemy, to make them think maybe this is the brink of defeat, but it's not. Who knows how God wants to do this for us? I don't know when the water's coming yet. I don't know how it's going to come. In their day, there was no wind, there was no rain. It just appeared. What has distracted you? What has stopped you? What is the thing in your own mind that you've started to give so much power to? Because World Revival Church, this is how the story ends for them. They withdrew in retreat, and then we're on to the next story. This is it. But this doesn't have to be our ending. This doesn't have to be your ending. Whatever has been distracting you, whatever has been ensnaring you, whatever voice has gotten in here and said, it's not that big a deal. You don't need to do that so much. You don't need to give so much. You don't need to keep stoking that flame. You don't need to go home and get on your face before God. Whatever things have become so much more important, it doesn't have to stay that way. You can change it. You can change it tonight. You can change it tonight. You can start now. In a little bit, we're gonna have the prayer warriors come up here, and you can start the process of change and say, that's not gonna be my ending. My ending is in revival. My ending is ditches full of water and victory throughout the whole land. I'm not stopping one town short. I'm not stopping one town short. You are not called to stop one town short. Maybe that's why you've been getting so frustrated and agitated, and you've been starting to give up on the inside as you feel like that one last thing is inconquerable. It's gotten too big. And you decided, well, maybe it's not worth it. It's worth it. I'm telling you, it's worth it. This is a worthwhile pursuit. This is a worthwhile endeavor, us pursuing God and not letting that offense, not letting that bitterness, not letting those unmet expectations, those hurts, those wounds. Why is it becoming so big? How did it become so big? It started with just believing a superstitious lie. That's all it is, isn't it? That's all it takes is you start entertaining that thought and feeding that thought instead of feeding that fire. And you fed that thought, and pretty soon it's causing you to drag your heels on the way to church. And you're not as excited as you once were. And you're quick to go home, and you're not fellowshipping as much and encouraging somebody else. Because we're not here to we're not digging the ditches just for me, Aaron Lage. We're digging the ditches for us, for our future, for the people who are going to come, for the people who are currently coming. I'm preparing a place. We're preparing a place. We've got to prepare, but we can't be so easily talked out of this. We can't be so easily talked out of this, church. You used to run to the altar. You used to have sermons that challenged you on repeat in your car. And then you actually made adjustments when you heard the conviction. And now we just nod our head and say, oh, that's good, and then no thought, no plan to put it into practice. Tonight, I feel like is a night we need to get on our faces and examine our hearts before God. Personally, each one of us individually, and asking God, what's gotten so big? What superstitious thing? What voice of the enemy? What distraction has started keeping me from you? That has started tamping down that flame of passion and zeal and holy fire? What's stopping it? What's stopping that flow? What's stopping that passion? Asking God, what is it? How come when I go home, my Bible's the last thing I'm thinking about? How come when I go home, you're not running through my mind, Jesus? What's happened? What's happened? Tonight, we must examine ourselves. We must examine our heart, because the fury of the enemy is great, because he does not want us to have this victory. He does not want us to have this victory. He does not want you to have this victory. It's stopping you. It's stopping you. You've had a lot of good. You've had a lot of fruit. You've had so much. We've had so much, World Revival Church. But we all know there's more. We all know there's more. I know that's why you really showed up. I know that's part of why you're so committed. Because you know there's more. You've seen the more. You want the more. But right now, tonight, there's something that's been stopping you. There's something that's been hindering you. What is it for you? And are you willing to give it up? Or has it become too important? Has the sacrifice on the altar of a pagan god taken the place of the sacrifice on the altar of the real God? Who really gave his son? Who really gave his son for us? Who really laid down his life so that you and I can be close to him and walk in his presence? That's the real sacrifice. That's the real reason we're digging these ditches. We've been given the victory, and we forgot all the hard work that we put into digging those ditches. We've gotten lost. We've gotten lost in the battle. We've gotten lost in the battle. Stop giving it so much power. Stop giving that voice so much power. It doesn't have any. It's just as powerless as this king sacrificing his son. What a worthless sacrifice. It really didn't accomplish anything except wait. It did because they gave it power, didn't it? They gave it power. Is it such a terrible thing to go out and eat something from our coffee shop? No, it's not that big a deal if you're doing it with that passion and fire still in your heart. Is it such a big deal to watch a movie now and then? Am I railing against Hollywood and the media? No, that's not what we're talking about, is it? We're talking about the fire and the passion here. I want to make sure we're attacking the right things and we're not being distracted by the wrong things. We're giving things that don't have any power except what we give it. Except what we give it. And I have a feeling some of you have been giving away too much of it. And you've been feeling that fury of the enemy. And he's been slowly taking more and more and swallowing more and more. And tonight, it's got to stop. Tonight, it's got to stop.